Who created God? Secrets, hidden in ancient texts. My blessings come from the grace of God. Everything I have, every victory, and every moment of joy flows from His unending love. Please follow me so I can share them with you and inspire you to experience the same abundance in your life. Drop an Amen if you have God in your heart and believe in His powerful grace that transforms, restores, and uplifts us daily. Have you ever asked yourself the question, who created God? It's one of those profound, paradoxical questions that seems almost impossible to answer, yet it lingers in the minds of many. Some may brush it off as a question too deep to contemplate, while others might wonder if there's a hidden truth behind it that has yet to be uncovered. What if I told you that the answer to this question isn't as simple as it seems, and the answers may be hidden in ancient texts, both within the Bible and beyond, waiting to reveal the mysteries of God's eternal nature? In this video, we're going to explore the theological, philosophical, and spiritual depths of this question and uncover secrets from ancient scriptures that reveal more about God's existence and His uncreated nature. You might wonder, how can God exist without a creator? It's a paradox that has perplexed theologians, philosophers, and scientists alike for centuries. But the beauty of this question lies in the journey we take to explore it. Because understanding God's eternal nature isn't about finding an answer in a simple statement. It's about diving deep into the very nature of reality, the divine, and the origins of the universe itself. As a Christian, the question of who created God taps into the very core of our beliefs. Our faith teaches us that God is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He exists beyond time, space, and human understanding. But how do we reconcile that with the very human need to understand where things come from? Is there a way to explore this mystery without diminishing the majesty of God's divine being? Can we truly grasp the nature of God's eternal existence? Or is this one of those divine mysteries we are meant to accept with reverence and awe? Throughout history, many ancient texts, some found in the Bible and others hidden away in places like the Book of Enoch and the mystical writings of Kabbalah, have hinted at the nature of God in ways that are not always fully understood. The writings of early Christian philosophers, Jewish mystics, and even non-canonical texts offer fascinating insights into the eternal Creator. These texts, while often overlooked, hold keys to understanding how we can view the concept of creation and the existence of God in a way that transcends the limitations of time and space. In this video, we're not just going to explore the question from a surface level. We'll dive into these ancient texts, uncover the wisdom they offer, and reveal how they provide a deeper understanding of God's existence. By the end of this journey, you may not have a straightforward answer to the question, who created God? But you will have a deeper understanding of the profound mystery that surrounds the nature of the divine, and how ancient wisdom can shed light on what may seem like an unanswerable question. Let's begin this exploration of divine eternity and the secrets that have been waiting to be discovered for centuries. Part 1. The eternal nature of God in Christian theology. When we ask, who created God? We are immediately confronted with a concept that challenges our human understanding of existence. To create something implies that it has a beginning, a cause, and an end. But if we are talking about God, an all-powerful, all-knowing, and eternal being, then the very idea of creation becomes complicated. In Christian theology, God is not a being who was created. He simply exists, always has, and always will. Understanding this concept is crucial, not just in answering the question, but in exploring the profound depth of God's eternal nature. From the beginning of the Bible, we are introduced to God as the creator of everything. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1:1. However, this foundational verse doesn't answer the question of who created God. Instead, it sets the stage for the belief that God is the origin of all things. But how do we understand the nature of this creator? What does it mean for God to exist beyond the constraints of time, space, and human logic? Christian doctrine teaches that God is eternal. He has no beginning and no end. He is the Alpha and the Omega, as stated in Revelation 22:13. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. These titles emphasize the belief that God transcends time itself. Time, as we know it, is part of creation, but God exists outside of this creation. He is not bound by the past, present, or future. He simply is. This idea of God's eternal nature can be difficult to grasp, especially because everything in our experience has a beginning and an end. We understand the world through the lens of cause and effect. Everything in nature appears to have a cause, a creator, or a point of origin. But when we turn our gaze toward the divine, we encounter something entirely different. The question of who created God can be seen as a misunderstanding of the nature of divinity. In Christian theology, the correct understanding is not that God was created, but that God is the creator, the source of all that exists. In philosophy, this concept is sometimes referred to as the uncaused cause. This term reflects the idea that God is the necessary being, the one who causes everything else to exist, but who is not caused by anything. Thomas Aquinas, one of the most influential Christian philosophers, argued that in order for something to exist, there must be a first cause that itself is not caused. If there were no first cause, then nothing else could exist. For Aquinas, this first cause is God. God's existence is self-sustaining. He does not need anything outside of himself to exist. This is where the question, who created God, falls apart when we view God through the lens of Christian theology. It's not that God was created by someone or something else. It's that God is the ultimate source of all existence. His being is not contingent on anything. He simply is. This idea is beautifully captured in Exodus 3:14, where God reveals himself to Moses, saying, "I am who I am." This phrase, in its simplest form, affirms God's eternal, self-sustaining nature. He does not rely on anyone or anything else for his existence. But what does this mean for us as Christians? It means that when we worship God, we are worshiping a being who is eternal, beyond time, and the origin of everything. God is not part of the created world, but is wholly separate from it, transcendent and otherworldly. And while we may never fully comprehend the mystery of his eternal existence, this understanding shapes the way we view not only our faith, but also the world around us. It shifts our perspective from a limited, finite understanding of existence to a broader divine view that recognizes God as the ultimate foundation of everything. The concept of God's eternal nature also leads us to a deeper understanding of how he interacts with creation. As the eternal creator, God is not bound by time in the way we experience it. He exists in all of time simultaneously. He is present in the past, the present, and the future. This timelessness means that God is not limited by the linear progression of events. He knows the end from the beginning, Isaiah 46:10, and he operates outside the constraints of our human understanding of time. Through this eternal nature, God is able to act in the world in ways that are beyond our comprehension. His divine providence ensures that he is actively involved in creation, guiding and sustaining it, even though he is not limited by the physical realm. This view challenges the question of creation because it reveals that God, by his very nature, cannot be created. Instead, he is the one who created all that we see and all that we cannot see. Everything that exists is a reflection of his eternal will. In sum, the question, who created God, is ultimately unanswerable because it rests on a misunderstanding of God's nature. God is not subject to the rules of creation that govern everything else in existence. He is the Creator, the eternal, uncaused cause of all things. To truly grasp this concept, we must move beyond the limits of time and space and recognize that God exists beyond them. The mystery of God's eternal existence is not something to be solved. It is a profound truth to be marveled at. And in this mystery, we are invited to deepen our understanding of who God is and how He interacts with His creation. As we continue exploring this question, we will turn to ancient texts and philosophies that illuminate this idea further, shedding light on how past thinkers grappled with these concepts and how we, as Christians, can better understand the nature of the Creator. By doing so, we'll uncover deeper insights into the mystery of God's eternal existence and how this truth shapes the world in which we live. Part 2. Insights from Ancient Texts Beyond the Bible. As we continue to explore the question of who created God, it's important to recognize that many ancient texts, both within and outside of the Bible, offer unique insights into the nature of God and the concept of creation. While Christian theology provides a clear answer, God is eternal and uncreated, there are hidden layers of wisdom in ancient religious texts that help us understand why this question is so perplexing and how different cultures have attempted to grapple with the same mystery. The Old Testament, especially in its earliest chapters, emphasizes God's role as the creator of the universe. The opening lines of Genesis declare, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Genesis 1:1. This fundamental belief in God, as the originator of all that exists, is central to Christian thought. But it also invites a deeper reflection. God is the starting point of everything in existence. But as we move through the narrative of Scripture, it becomes clear that God Himself is not subject to creation. He is not bound by the laws of the physical universe He created. However, the ancient texts from which we draw wisdom aren't limited to just the canonical books of the Bible. There are non-canonical books, such as the Book of Enoch, which offer unique perspectives on God's nature and the creation of the world. Although the Book of Enoch is not part of the Christian Bible, it was highly regarded by many early Christian communities and contains teachings that may surprise us. It reveals complex interactions between God, angels, and humanity that go beyond the more familiar stories in the Bible. It also offers a vision of God's eternal power and the profound mystery of His creation. In the Book of Enoch, we find an exploration of cosmic order, divine judgment, and the heavenly realms, subjects that make us think more deeply about the Creator's nature. While the book doesn't answer the question of who created God directly, it provides a rich, vivid portrait of God's relationship to the world and to creation, emphasizing His sovereignty and uncreated essence. The angels, for example, are depicted as powerful beings who serve God, but they are not creators in the way God is. Enoch's heavenly visions reveal God's eternal rule over the universe, suggesting that while all things were made by Him, He Himself remains uncreated and eternal. Jewish mysticism also offers profound insights into the divine nature and the idea of God's existence outside of time and space. Kabbalistic texts, for instance, provide a mystical interpretation of the creation process, revealing that the divine source, often referred to as Ein Sof, meaning endless or infinite, exists beyond any limitations. In Kabbalah, Ein Sof is not seen as something created or finite, but as the infinite wellspring from which all creation flows. The idea that God is infinite and beyond human comprehension aligns with Christian teachings about God's eternal nature, reinforcing the concept that He cannot be created because He is the very source of all things. In the ancient Hebrew tradition, God is understood as not just a creator, but a sustaining force in the universe. The Lord is described in the Psalms as the one who created the earth and the heavens, yet His power and presence are ever present, continuously maintaining the world in existence. Psalm 104:30 states, "When you send your Spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground." This passage highlights not just the act of creation, but the ongoing sustaining of life, reinforcing the idea that God is not a finite being with a point of origin, but an eternal force that upholds all things. The Stoics, ancient Greek philosophers who greatly influenced early Christian thought, also grappled with questions of the divine. They believed in a cosmic principle that they called the Logos, a rational divine force that governs the universe. While not specifically a Christian concept, the Logos shares striking similarities with the Christian understanding of God as both the creator and the sustaining force in the universe. Stoic philosophy, while not addressing the question of who created God directly, affirmed the existence of a rational, uncaused force that governs all things. This philosophical concept likely influenced early Christian thinking, particularly in the writings of John, who famously describes Jesus as the Logos in the opening verses of his Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1. As we explore these ancient texts, whether they are canonical, apocryphal, or from outside the Christian tradition, we begin to see a common thread. God is seen as eternal, uncreated, and beyond human understanding. The concept of God's eternal existence is a foundational principle in both Christianity and many other ancient belief systems. While these texts don't directly answer the question of who created God, they provide us with a deeper understanding of why this question may not have a simple answer. God, in the Christian understanding, is not a created being, but the creator of all things, existing beyond time, space, and human comprehension. The more we dive into ancient wisdom, the more we realize that the true mystery lies in understanding the nature of this eternal creator, who is beyond the reach of any created force. These ancient texts provide us with glimpses into the divine mystery, suggesting that God's nature cannot be confined to our finite understanding. Instead of looking for a definitive answer to who created God, perhaps the true answer is that God is beyond creation, and we are invited to marvel at the mystery of his eternal existence. This journey into the ancient wisdom of the scriptures and other mystical teachings helps us grasp the incredible reality of the divine and leaves us in awe of the boundless, uncreated God. Part 3. Philosophical and theological arguments for the existence of God. As we continue to explore the profound question of who created God, we must delve into the philosophical and theological perspectives that have shaped the way we understand God's existence. The inquiry into God's creation is not only a theological question, but also a deeply philosophical one. Ancient philosophers, both within the Christian tradition and outside of it, have grappled with this very issue and provided compelling arguments that continue to influence how we understand the nature of God today. The most common philosophical argument for God's existence, and by extension, the concept of God being uncreated, is the cosmological argument. This argument, rooted in classical philosophy, is based on the premise that everything in the universe has a cause, but there must be a first cause, an uncaused cause, without which nothing would exist. This first cause, many philosophers argue, must be God, the uncaused cause. The idea of an uncaused cause stems from the work of Thomas Aquinas, a 13th century Catholic philosopher and theologian. Aquinas, in his 5 Ways, famously argued that everything in the world is caused by something else, but there must be a point where the chain of causality begins. He called this the first cause, and it must be uncaused, as something cannot come from nothing. For Aquinas, this first cause is God, and since God is uncaused, he has no creator. This is significant because it answers the question of who created God, by showing that in the realm of divine existence, there must be something that does not require a cause, something eternal and self-existent. In this way, Aquinas presented God not as a being within the chain of cause and effect, but as the very source of that chain. God is the first cause that gives rise to everything else in the universe. but he himself does not have a cause. In this sense, the question of God's creation is irrelevant because he exists outside of the limitations of time, space, and causality. God is the ultimate reality, beyond any possible origin or beginning. The argument from contingency. Another philosophical argument for the uncreated nature of God is the argument from contingency, which was also advanced by Thomas Aquinas and later elaborated by other Christian philosophers. This argument contends that everything in the universe is contingent, meaning that it depends on something else for its existence. For example, humans are contingent beings. They rely on food, water, air, and a variety of other factors to survive. Similarly, every object, animal, and even the universe itself is contingent upon something else. But if everything is contingent, then there must be something that is not contingent. There must be a necessary being, a being that exists by necessity and does not depend on anything else for its existence. This necessary being, according to the argument from contingency, is God. God exists by necessity. He is not contingent upon anything else. He does not rely on any external factors or causes for his existence. If he did, he would not be God. God is the only being whose existence is necessary, not contingent. Therefore, God's existence is not contingent on any other being or force, making him uncreated and eternal. The argument from contingency offers a powerful explanation for why God cannot be created. God, by definition, is the necessary being that all other contingent beings depend on. The ontological argument. Moving from cosmological and contingent arguments, we also encounter the ontological argument for God's existence, particularly proposed by St. Anselm in the 11th century. Anselm's argument is based on the nature of God as the greatest conceivable being. He proposed that if we can conceive of a being that is greater than any other being, then that being must exist in reality, because existence in reality is greater than existence merely in the mind. Anselm argued that God, as the greatest conceivable being, must exist because if he did not, he would not be the greatest conceivable being. Therefore, the existence of God is logically necessary. While the ontological argument doesn't directly address the question of God's creation, it does support the idea of God's existence as necessary and eternal. If God exists as the greatest conceivable being, he cannot be created because creation implies a beginning, whereas a necessary being, by definition, has no beginning and no end. God as pure actuality, Aristotle's influence. In addition to these classical arguments, Aristotle's concept of pure actuality offers another philosophical perspective that relates to God's uncreated nature. Aristotle believed that everything in the universe moves from potentiality to actuality. In other words, all things in the world are potential. They have the capacity to become something, but they require an actualizer, something that moves them from potential to reality. For Aristotle, the unmoved mover was the ultimate cause of all motion and change in the universe. This unmoved mover was not itself moved or changed by anything else. It existed in a state of pure actuality, meaning it had no potentiality. It was fully realized in every sense. Aristotle argued that this unmoved mover must be the source of all things, but it must also be outside of the chain of movement. In Christian theology, this unmoved mover can be understood as God, the one being whose existence is not contingent upon anything else and who, in his pure actuality, is the ultimate cause of all that is. This philosophical view complements the Christian understanding of God as eternal and uncreated. If God is the unmoved mover, then he cannot be created because he is the one who initiates all motion and change. God exists as the ultimate reality, not in potential, but in perfect actuality. He is not subject to the laws of cause and effect that govern the created world. He is the creator of those laws. Why God cannot be created. Ultimately, these philosophical arguments converge on a single point. God is uncreated because he is the necessary, eternal, and ultimate being. His existence is not contingent on anything, nor is he the product of any cause. He is the first cause, the necessary being, the greatest conceivable being, and the unmoved mover. These concepts help us understand why the question of who created God cannot be answered in any straightforward way. God, by his very nature, is uncreated and eternal. He transcends time, space, and the limits of human understanding. In conclusion, from the cosmological argument to the ontological argument to the concept of pure actuality, we see that the nature of God as uncreated is a deeply rooted concept in both Christian theology and philosophical thought. These arguments provide a rational foundation for understanding God's existence as eternal, uncaused, and beyond creation. The question, who created God, ultimately collapses under the weight of these philosophical insights, because in the case of God, creation is not applicable. God is the uncreated creator, the ultimate source of all that exists. Understanding this reality opens our minds to the incredible mystery of God's eternal nature and invites us to embrace the awe that comes with recognizing the Creator's vastness and transcendence. Part 4. The Mystery of Creation in Christianity and Other Faiths. As we continue to explore the profound question of who created God, it's important to understand how different faiths, particularly Christianity, grapple with the idea of creation, existence, and the nature of God. Christianity's teachings are centered on the belief that God is the creator of all things, yet he himself is uncreated. This paradox is not unique to Christianity. Many other faiths and philosophical systems have their own perspectives on creation and the divine. By examining both the Christian view of creation and how other major religions approach the concept of God and his origin, we can gain a broader understanding of the mysteries surrounding God's existence. The Christian doctrine of creation. In Christian theology, God's role as the creator is central. The Bible begins with the account of God creating the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1:1. Establishing him as the ultimate creator. Christians believe that God created everything ex nihilo, out of nothing. The universe, with all its complexity and beauty, is seen as a direct result of God's will and power. However, this belief raises the inevitable question: if God created everything, who or what created God? The key to understanding this question lies in recognizing that God is not part of the created world. God does not exist within the confines of space, time, or matter. He transcends all of creation. In Christian doctrine, God is not bound by the same laws of cause and effect that govern the created universe. God's act of creation is a divine act of will, an expression of his power and authority. Creation, in this sense, is not something that began God's existence, but rather a manifestation of his eternal existence. The doctrine of creation also emphasizes the relationship between God and humanity. In Genesis, after creating the world, God creates man in his own image, Genesis 1:26. This idea is foundational to Christian thought because it speaks to the intimate relationship between God and humanity. While God is the creator of all things, humans are made to reflect his nature. The Bible teaches that God's creative act was not a one-time event, but an ongoing process, with his presence and power sustaining the universe at every moment. This view of creation underscores the idea that God, though he is the creator of everything, has no origin or beginning himself. He is the eternal creator who exists beyond the laws of time and space. The act of creation does not change his nature. It is simply a revelation of his eternal existence and his will to bring order and purpose to the world. Creation myths in other religions. While Christianity teaches that God is the uncreated creator, other religions offer different creation stories, often with varying perspectives on the nature of the divine. In many cultures, the idea of a creator God is central, but the specifics of their origin stories vary greatly. In Hinduism, for example, the creation myth is multifaceted. One key idea in Hindu thought is the concept of Brahman, the ultimate, unchanging reality that is the source of all creation. Brahman is eternal, uncreated, and transcendent, similar to the Christian concept of God. However, the creation of the world is also attributed to various gods, such as Vishnu, who is said to have manifested in different forms to preserve the universe. This creation is cyclical, with the world being periodically destroyed and reborn in an endless cycle of creation, preservation, and destruction. In Hinduism, the divine is both immanent and transcendent, with Brahman as the ultimate, uncreated source of all life. In Islam, the concept of God, or Allah, is similar to the Christian and Jewish understanding of an eternal, uncreated creator. The Quran teaches that Allah created the universe and everything within it. However, just like in Christianity, Allah's creation is distinct from His essence. He is the creator, and nothing created can be like Him. The Quran emphasizes that Allah is beyond time and space, existing outside of the created order. Allah, there is no deity except Him, the ever-living, the sustainer of existence. Quran 3:2. This highlights the Islamic belief in Allah's eternal nature and His role as the uncaused cause of the universe. In the ancient Greek mythology, creation stories often involved gods that were themselves born from earlier gods. For example, the primordial deity, Chaos, gave birth to Gaia, the earth, and other forces that led to the formation of the world. Greek mythology typically presents gods that, while powerful, are not uncreated. They are part of a divine hierarchy. This presents a contrast to the monotheistic view found in Christianity, where God is seen as the sole, uncreated creator. Comparing creation narratives. While each religion offers its own unique creation myth or account, one common thread is the recognition of a supreme being who is responsible for the origin of the universe. In monotheistic religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, God is understood to be eternal and uncreated, existing outside of time and space. In polytheistic religions, the gods may be born or created, but there is still a recognition of an underlying eternal source from which everything flows. In Christianity, the Bible's portrayal of God as the Creator stands apart in its assertion that God is the only uncaused cause, the ultimate source of all creation. Other religions, while acknowledging the existence of gods or divine beings, often point to a divine origin that is part of a larger cosmic cycle or pantheon. This idea of God being uncreated and eternal is a central tenet of Christian theology, setting it apart from other religious views of the divine. God as the architect of time and space. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Christian doctrine of creation is the belief that God is the architect not only of the physical universe, but of time itself. In Genesis, we read that God created the heavens and the earth, and by doing so, He established the very fabric of time and space. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. This concept of God as the creator of time itself is crucial to understanding His uncreated nature. Since God created time, He exists beyond it, unaffected by its passage. This understanding of God as the creator of time and space reinforces the Christian view that God cannot be created. Time and space are part of the created world. God exists outside these dimensions. The act of creation, then, is not something that begins or ends God's existence, but rather something that flows from His eternal being. God, as the Creator, stands above the very fabric of reality He brought into existence. This concept can be difficult for human minds to grasp because everything we know is bound by time. But in Christian theology, God's existence transcends these boundaries. He exists beyond time, uncreated and eternal. This eternal, uncreated existence is central to the Christian understanding of God. And it is in this understanding that the question, who created God, finds its answer. God is not created because he is the source of everything. In sum, the mystery of creation in Christianity points us to a profound truth. God is the eternal creator who exists beyond time, space, and creation itself. While other religions may offer different views on the divine, the Christian doctrine of an uncreated creator stands apart in its assertion that God exists outside the created world. The question, who created God, becomes irrelevant because God is the uncaused cause, the eternal source of all that is, and this truth shapes our understanding of the divine and our relationship with him. Part 5. Theological Implications and Deep Mysticism. As we continue our exploration of the eternal and uncreated nature of God, it's important to recognize that the concept of God's existence touches more than just theology and philosophy. It also reaches into the realms of mysticism and personal spirituality. The mystery of God's eternal nature is not just an intellectual exercise. It has deep implications for how we relate to God, how we experience his presence, and how we understand the very nature of reality. In Christian mysticism, the ineffable nature of God has long been a subject of profound reflection. Mystics throughout history have attempted to encounter and comprehend God in a way that transcends the limitations of the human mind. Their teachings, writings, and experiences give us glimpses into the divine, offering insights that go beyond logic and reason. The writings of figures like Saint John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, and other great mystics remind us that the question of God's creation is a reflection of a deeper longing to understand the very essence of God's being. One of the central ideas in Christian mysticism is that God is both immanent and transcendent. While God is beyond creation, uncreated and eternal, he is also present within it, sustaining and interacting with the world. This paradoxical nature of God can be seen in the concept of God being both here and beyond. The mystics understood that in order to truly experience God, one must look beyond the limitations of human comprehension and embrace the mystery. God's eternal nature cannot be fully captured by our finite minds, and this is something that mystics have always acknowledged. Yet even in the midst of this mystery, they still sought to encounter God directly through prayer, meditation, and contemplation. St. John of the Cross, for example, spoke of the dark night of the soul, a period in which the soul feels separated from God and struggles with doubt and despair. However, this darkness is not a sign of God's absence, but a call to a deeper, more intimate relationship with the divine. In the dark night, the mystic learns to let go of their attachments to the material world and their limited conceptions of God, and in doing so, they come closer to the eternal, uncreated God. This experience is not about understanding God with the mind, but about surrendering to the mystery of God's presence in their lives. In this sense, mysticism points to a deep truth. God is beyond creation, but he is also intimately present with us, drawing us closer to himself even as we struggle to understand his nature. The teachings of Christian mystics remind us that while the question of who created God may seem unanswerable, it is not something that should cause anxiety or frustration. Rather, it is a call to humility and wonder. The mystery of God's eternal existence is an invitation to trust in God's wisdom and to let go of our need to fully comprehend his nature. Mysticism, at its core, invites us to experience God directly, beyond the limitations of our rational minds, and to encounter the divine in ways that go beyond human logic. As we reflect on the nature of God's eternal existence, we must also recognize that this mystery invites us into a deeper relationship with God. It calls us to trust in his sovereignty, to recognize that we do not need all the answers, and to find peace in the mystery. God's uncreated nature is not a problem to be solved. but a profound reality to be embraced. It is in this embrace that we find our peace and understanding, not by unraveling every question, but by allowing ourselves to be immersed in the presence of the one who exists beyond time and space. The theological implications of God's eternal existence go beyond just intellectual understanding. They affect the very way we live our lives. If we truly grasp that God is the eternal, uncreated Creator, we realize that our existence is bound to Him in ways that go far beyond our comprehension. This realization can transform our relationship with God, leading us to worship with greater awe and reverence. It can also change the way we view the world around us. Understanding that everything is created by and sustained by an uncreated eternal God leads us to view creation itself as sacred. Every moment, every breath, and every experience is a reflection of God's eternal will. God as the source of all creation. In the Christian faith, God's uncreated nature also leads us to a deeper appreciation of creation itself. The universe and everything within it are not random or accidental. They are the result of God's eternal will. This idea can be seen in the opening chapter of the Gospel of John, where John writes, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made." John 1:1-3. Here the Word, which Christians understand to be Jesus, is identified as the Creator of all things. Jesus, as the eternal Logos, existed before creation, and is the one through whom the universe came into being. This speaks to the Christian belief that all of creation is intimately connected to God's eternal, uncreated nature. Theologians have long reflected on this idea, considering how the uncreated Creator interacts with creation. God does not create and then step away. He remains intimately involved with His creation. This is evident in the Christian doctrine of divine providence, which teaches that God continues to sustain the universe by His will. He is not a distant, passive observer, but an active participant in the ongoing unfolding of creation. This understanding invites Christians to view the world around them as a reflection of God's eternal presence, reminding them that the Creator is always at work in the world, sustaining and renewing it. The mystery of God's eternal existence also calls us to a deeper sense of awe and humility. If God is the eternal Creator who existed before time and will continue to exist beyond time, then our understanding of reality is just a small part of a much larger picture. The mysteries of God's eternal nature point us to the limits of human knowledge and the need for humility in the face of the divine. It challenges us to embrace the mystery rather than trying to explain it away. When we realize that God is beyond creation, beyond our understanding, we are invited to trust in His wisdom and live with a sense of awe and wonder. In this sense, the question, who created God, is not something we must resolve intellectually. It is an invitation to dive deeper into the mystery of God's being. It is an opportunity to let go of the need to control our understanding of the divine and instead open ourselves to the awe-inspiring reality of the Creator. In embracing the mystery of God's eternal nature, we are drawn closer to the heart of the divine, where true peace and understanding are found. Part 6. The Modern Search for Answers and God's Nature. As we move forward in our exploration of the question, who created God? It's important to recognize that, in our modern world, many individuals have sought to understand God's nature through the lens of science, philosophy, and even personal experience. The question of creation, existence, and God's uncreated nature may seem like an ancient theological debate, but it's one that remains deeply relevant today. As we progress in our understanding of the universe, the mysteries of existence, and the origins of life, we also find that our quest for answers brings us back to the very same questions that ancient thinkers and religious traditions pondered centuries ago. In today's world, science has opened up new doors for understanding the origins of the universe. But these discoveries often lead to more questions about the ultimate cause of everything. The Big Bang Theory, for instance, proposes that the universe began from an incredibly dense and hot state, expanding over billions of years into the vast cosmos we observe today. But what caused the Big Bang? What existed before the singularity, and how did the laws of physics come into being? These are questions that science can attempt to answer in terms of physical causes, but they still leave us facing the deeper mystery of an uncaused cause, the question of God. Modern physics, especially quantum mechanics and theories like string theory, have led to complex questions about the nature of existence and reality. Some scientists, such as physicist Albert Einstein, spoke of the cosmic order as evidence of a divine intelligence behind the workings of the universe. Though Einstein himself was hesitant to engage fully with religion, his awe at the complexity and harmony of the universe suggests a belief that there is a mind behind the laws of nature. For many, science and faith are not at odds. The more we learn about the universe, the more we may recognize the signature of a creator who is beyond our understanding, eternal and uncreated. However, despite advancements in scientific knowledge, questions like who created God remain as profound as ever. In the modern age, we may be able to explain how the universe works, how galaxies form, and how life arises from a series of complex chemical reactions, but we still do not have an answer to why any of this exists in the first place. The cosmological argument, which has been central to philosophical discussions for centuries, remains one of the most compelling reasons to believe in an uncaused cause, a being outside of time and space, the eternal creator. This is where faith and reason converge. Science may show us how the universe operates, but it is faith that provides us with the answer to why it exists. In the quest for understanding God's nature, the question of his uncreated existence often leads to a sense of awe and mystery that challenges the limits of human understanding. As modern thinkers wrestle with the nature of existence and the origin of the universe, the answer to the question of who created God takes on a spiritual dimension. It is not merely a question that can be solved with empirical evidence or philosophical reasoning. It is a mystery that beckons us to look beyond the material world and toward the divine. This modern search for answers also calls us to engage with God in a more personal and experiential way. We live in an age of vast information, where knowledge is more accessible than ever. Yet despite all of our technological advancements and intellectual achievements, the question of God's uncreated nature cannot be answered solely through intellect. Instead, we must approach it with humility, recognizing that there are mysteries beyond human comprehension. This calls us to cultivate a deeper spiritual connection, to explore the nature of God through prayer, meditation, and personal reflection. Throughout Christian history, great thinkers and mystics have understood that some aspects of God's nature can only be experienced through a relationship with Him, not fully explained through words or concepts. For instance, mystics like St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross spoke of a direct encounter with God that transcended intellectual understanding. These experiences were not about grasping a logical explanation of God's existence, but about opening oneself to the divine presence in a way that surpasses human comprehension. The reality of God's eternal and uncreated nature is something that is known not just through reasoning, but through encounter, a profound connection that goes beyond the mind and reaches into the heart and spirit. In the modern world, this pursuit of spiritual understanding has led to a renewed interest in ancient wisdom, including the teachings of the Church Fathers, mystics, and philosophers who have long grappled with the question of God's nature. Their reflections offer insights that can guide us today, showing us how to live with the mystery of God's uncreated existence rather than trying to resolve it through intellectual means alone. This spiritual journey is not about solving the paradox of creation, but about entering into a deeper relationship with the eternal Creator. As we confront questions like, who created God? We are reminded that our finite minds are limited in understanding the infinite. However, through faith, humility, and a willingness to encounter God beyond our reasoning, we open ourselves to a deeper understanding of His eternal presence. This journey does not have to provide us with all the answers, but it leads us to a place of awe, trust, and reverence for the divine mystery that surrounds us. In many ways, the modern search for answers to the question of God's creation parallels the ancient search. It leads us not only to a deeper understanding of God's eternal nature, but also to a deeper understanding of ourselves, our place in the universe, and our relationship with the Creator. As we explore the mysteries of existence, we are invited to engage with God on a personal level, embracing the mystery rather than seeking to solve it. In doing so, we come to know the eternal, uncreated God, not just through reason, but through a profound and intimate experience of His presence. Conclusion. As we have journeyed through the depths of the question, who created God? We've encountered profound mysteries that challenge both our intellect and our faith. The nature of God as eternal, uncreated, and beyond the confines of time and space is a concept that both stretches and strengthens our understanding of the divine. Through the exploration of Christian theology, ancient texts, philosophical arguments, and modern scientific perspectives, we've come to appreciate that this question isn't one that can be easily answered with logic or reasoning alone. It is, in many ways, a divine mystery that beckons us to embrace the unknown and recognize our own limits in the face of the infinite. At the heart of this exploration is the realization that God is the eternal creator, unbound by time, uncreated and independent of all that exists. God's essence is not contingent upon anything. He is the ultimate cause of all things, the first cause, the uncaused cause. This fundamental truth runs through Christian theology, ancient texts, and philosophical arguments, reminding us that God is the eternal source of all life, and He cannot be created because He is the very definition of existence itself. Through the lens of Christian faith, we find that the mystery of God's existence is not something to be solved through human intellect alone. The divine mystery calls us to a deeper relationship with God, one that goes beyond the limits of rational thought and into the realm of spiritual experience. While we may never fully comprehend the infinite nature of God, we can know Him in a deeply personal and intimate way through prayer, contemplation, and the pursuit of virtue. Our understanding of God's eternal nature is rooted in faith, and as we embrace the mystery, we come closer to the heart of the divine. God's uncreated nature is also a reminder of the awe and reverence that should accompany our relationship with the Creator. In a world filled with questions and uncertainties, the mystery of God's eternal existence invites us to trust in His wisdom and to rest in the certainty that He is not bound by the limits of our understanding. As we navigate life and seek to grow in our faith, we can find peace in the knowledge that God's divine plan is not something we need to fully grasp in order to believe. Faith is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting in God's eternal goodness, His unchanging nature, and His presence in our lives. As we close this reflection on the question, who created God? I encourage you to carry with you the profound mystery of God's eternal nature. Let it shape how you approach your relationship with Him, how you view the world, and how you live your life. Instead of trying to unravel the divine mystery with your mind alone, allow your heart to embrace the awe and wonder that come from encountering a God who is eternal, uncreated, and beyond all that we can comprehend. And as you continue on your journey of faith, may you experience the depth of God's presence in ways that go beyond explanation, knowing that His eternal existence is not something to be fully understood, but something to be reverently lived out each day.